Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna.
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपीकांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कंचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदानेश्वरी विश्वभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् बोलो श्री राधे गोलोकानंद भगवान की जय।
जय
श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय।
जय
हरे कृष्णा सचिन।
हरे कृष्णा।
हाँ कैसे हो?
ठीक हो? आज
बस
या पेरेंट्स आए हुए हैं यहाँ पे।
हाँ आई नो।
बताया था आपको।
कैसा लग रहा है उनको?
Dude, after like almost 3-4 years, 3.5 years,
हाँ
हम लोग आ पाए।
right.
वो लोग आ रहे हैं यहाँ पे।
अभी एक दो दिन ठंडी हो गई, नहीं तो अच्छा चल रहा था नहीं?
हाँ आई नो। अब फिर भी ठीक हो रहा है ना, वेडनेसडे से अच्छा हो रहा है।
अच्छा वेडनेसडे से हो रहा है। राइट चलो कूल। नो दैट्स सो नाइस।
थैंक यू।
तो श्रीमद् भागवतम शुरू करते हैं अपन। सो कल 31st श्लोक पढ़ रहे थे हम लोग, एंड जैसा कि वी हैव बीन रीडिंग, Kapil Muni is describing transcendental knowledge. उसमें the part which you are reading right now is about like a living entity who is totally materialistic, totally materialist conscious, and he doesn't know or doesn't remember or doesn't get time or for whatever reasons, there is no devotion, there is no spiritual understanding or path. So then what happens is what is being described by Kapil Muni, like how of course the age grows, the old age comes, and then what happens with Yamdoots and so on and so forth. So we'll just continue to read this, and I think yesterday we read, right? He goes alone to the darkest regions of hell after quitting the present body, and the monies he acquired by enjoying other living entities is the passage money with which he leaves this world. Yeah. So of course, as we all know, the money is left behind. Yeah, either we leave the money or the money will leave us. But we'll be separated is what is being mentioned. So the best use of money, as long as it is within our position, is to spend it on Krishna consciousness. Yeah. To spend the money in like donating. In fact, we need to donate some to vedabase.com too, since we have been using that so long. So time to time, we can do some good donation cause. So let's start with the Shlok 32nd, Anilji.
जी हाँ। दैवे नासादितं तस्य शमलं निरये पुमान् भुनक्ते कुटुम्बपोषस्य हृतवित्त इवातुरः. Thus, by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the maintainer of kinsmen is put into a hellish condition to suffer for his sinful activities, like a man who has lost his wealth. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So it has been described like, how things happen. Let's read this purport, Sachin.
The example set herein is that the sinful person suffers just like a man who has lost his wealth. The human form of body is achieved by the conditioned soul after many, many births and is a very valuable asset. Instead of utilizing this life to get liberation, if one uses it simply for the purpose of maintaining his so-called family and therefore performs foolish and unauthorized action, he is compared to a man who has lost his wealth and who, upon losing it, laments. When wealth is lost, there is no use lamenting, but as long as there is wealth, one has to utilize it properly and thereby gain eternal profit. It may be argued that when a man leaves his money earned by sinful activities, he also leaves his sinful activities here with his money. But it is especially mentioned herein that by superior arrangement, Daivena Saditam, although the man leaves behind him his sinfully earned money, he carries the effect of it. When a man steals some money, if he is caught and agrees to return it, he is not freed from the criminal punishment. By the law of the state, even though the returns, even if he returns the money, he has to undergo the punishment. Similarly, the money earned by a criminal process may be left by the man when dying, but by superior arrangement he carries with him the effect, and therefore he has to suffer hellish life. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So basically, it's explaining the law of karma and how things happen. And the one important thing which we've been reading is that the human form of body is achieved by the conditioned soul after many births, and is a very valuable asset. Yeah, very valuable asset, and so we need to utilize it very well, is what is being mentioned. Yeah? केवलेन राधर्मेण कुटुंब भरणोच्च सुख है याति जियो अंधाति मिस्त्रम चरमम तमस्य padam. Therefore, a person who is eager, very eager to maintain his family and kinsmen simply by black methods, suddenly goes to the darkest region of hell, which is known as Andhatamisra. Yeah. So, and also in previous sloks, we had read like some of the names of the different hells, right? So, but it says that, Charmam Tamasa Padam, like the lowest region, is, once the body is left, then that's what happens if it's not Krishna conscious. Yeah. Tarun? Tarun, can you read? Okay, Sachin.
अन्धस्थानं नरलोकस्य यावतीर्यातनादयः क्रमशः समनुक्रम्य पुनरत्राव्रजेच्छुचिः. Having gone through all the miserable hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest form of animal life prior to human birth, and having thus been purged of his sins, he is reborn again as a human being on this earth. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So who is saying all this? Who is speaking?
Kapil Muni is saying.
Right, yeah. Kapil Muni is giving answer to Devhuti's questions. Yeah. And he's saying that, the important part is having go through the miserable hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest forms of animal life prior to human birth. So human birth, you don't just get just like that, says like lowest forms of animal life and maybe 8.4 million different species prior to human birth. And having thus been purged of its sins, one is reborn again as a human being on his earth. Yeah. So the karmas, and because he is spending in animal life so many years of birth, what happens is the sins get purged, right? And then the law of karma, the karma becomes pure, and then one is reborn again as a human being on earth. Yeah. And then let's just read this. Tarun, you there? Looks like Tarun may be traveling or something. Anilji, apne?
Yeah. Just as a prisoner who has undergone troublesome prison life is set free again. The person who has always engaged in impious and mischievous activities is put into hellish conditions. And when he has undergone different hellish lives, namely those of lower animals like cats, dogs, and hawks, by the gradual process of evolution, he again comes back as a human being. The Bhagavad Gita, in Bhagavad Gita, it is stated that even though a person engaged in the practice of the yoga system may not finish perfectly and may fall down for some reason or other, his next life as a human being is guaranteed. It is stated that such a person who has fallen from the path of yoga practice is given a chance in his next life to take birth in a very rich family or in a very pious family. It is interpreted that rich family refers to a big mercantile family because generally people who engage in trades and mercantile business are very rich. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so couple of important things mentioned here, right? Of course. One we just read, like, when he has undergone eternal entity, undergoing through all these different life of animals, then what happens is by the gradual process of evolution, he again comes back as a human being. Yeah, we don't know how many years and all that it takes. But then you come back again after getting into the cycle of death and birth and different species. And then at some point, then you get the human being form. Yeah, so that's one thing which is very important mentioned here. And it also says that it gives a chance in his next life to take a birth in very rich family or a pious family, right? So if somebody has done really great karma, devotion, and if he is not able to go back to Godhead, at least he comes back as a human being is what is being mentioned here. Yeah. And it's nice to read this much. Tarun, can you read?
Hello, Gajendra. I'm driving, so I can't read right now.
Okay.
I'm just listening in.
Sure. No worries. Yeah. So it can be concluded that if someone is not willing to enter into hellish life, as in Tamishra or Andhatamishra, right? We know like those are names of the hells, then he must take to the process of Krishna consciousness, which is the first class yoga system. Because even if one is unable to attain complete Krishna consciousness in this life, he is guaranteed to at least take his next birth in a human family. He cannot be sent into a hellish condition. Krishna consciousness is the purest life and it protects all human beings from gliding down to hell to take a birth in a family of dogs or hawks. Yeah. So it says all those things can be solved by Krishna consciousness as a purest devotee. And I think this brings the end, ends the Bhakti Vedanta purport of third canto, 30th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Description by Lord Kapil of Adverse Fruitive Activities. Yeah, like adverse activities. Yeah, that's what we have been reading, like the one before that we read about the devotee and now about the people doing the adverse activity. So I think, and this ends the chapter. So now we have chapter 31. And the 31 is about the Lord Kapil's instructions on the movements of living entities. So the last chapter we are seeing how a living entity, if materially conscious, goes through so many tough conditions, situations. And now it actually shows how a living entity moves, and what's the nature of that. So we'll continue reading. Sachin?
Shri Bhagwan Vach Karmana Daiva Netredam Jantur Deho Papatta Ye Sriya Pravishta Udram Punsam Retah Kanashrayam. The personality of Godhead said, under the supervision of the Supreme Lord and according to the result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. It shows like how a living entity goes through, like from birth, yeah, to inception to the end, right? So that's what this chapter is about. Um, and let's read the first para, Anilji.
Yeah. As stated in the last chapter, after suffering different kinds of hellish conditions, a man comes again to the human form body. The same topic is continued in this chapter. In order to give a particular type of human form to a person who has already suffered hellish life, the soul is transferred to the semen of a man who is just suitable to become his father. During sexual intercourse, the soul is transferred through the semen of the father into the mother's womb in order to produce a particular type of body. This process is applicable to all embodied living entities, but it is specially mentioned for the man who has transferred to the Andhamishra hell after suffering there, when he has had many types of hellish bodies, like those of dogs and hogs, is to come again to the human form. He is given the chance to take his birth in the same type of body from which he degraded himself to hell. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So, of course, we all know how a living entity is born. Yeah. So, what is being described here? Kalilam tvekaratrena pancharatrena buddhadam dashahena tu karkandu hai peshandam vatata param. So on the first night, the sperm and ovum mix, and on the fifth night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. On the 10th night, it develops into a form like a plum, and after that, it gradually turns into a lump of flesh or an egg, as the case may be. Yeah. So it's essentially, it just describes like how um, the birth takes place and what a living entity goes through. Basically, let's read this, Sachin.
The body of the soul develops in four different ways according to its different sources. One kind of body, that of the trees and plants, sprouts from the earth. The second kind of body grows from perspiration, as with flies, germs and bugs. The third kind of body develops from eggs, and the fourth develops from an embryo. This verse indicates that after emulsification of the ovum and sperm, the body gradually develops either into a lump of flesh or into an egg, as the case may be. In the case of birds, it develops into an egg, and in the case of animals and human beings, it develops into a lump of flesh. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. So what is interesting in this para is like the different types of generation is given. Like some like from uh, like perspiration. Then how the plant comes together, and then the eggs and the embryo and so on and so forth. Yeah. So those are the four different types. How a living entity gets the body on this particular earth. So let's read this, Anilji.
मासेन तु शिरो द्वाभ्याम ब्राह्मणग्राह्य विग्रह नखलो मास्ति चर्माणि लिंगच्छिद्रोद्भवस्त्रिभिः. In the course of a month, a head is formed, and at the end of 2 months, the hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, and skin appear, as do the organ of generation and the other apertures in the body, namely the eyes, nostrils, ear, mouth, and anus. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, it's very interesting, like how the everything is described, like how it comes through, right? So I read this particular slok, Sachin.
चतुर्भिर्धातवः सप्त पंचभिः शुद्धुदुम्भद्वः षड्भिर्जरां युणा वितः कुक्षो भ्राम्यति दक्षिणे. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the seven essential ingredients of the body, namely child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, come into existence. At the end of 5 months, hunger and thirst make themselves felt, and at the end of 6 months, the fetus enclosed by the amnion begins to move on the right side of the abdomen. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, it says when the body of the child is completely formed at the end of 6 months, the child, if he is male, begins to move on the right side. Female starts to move on the left hand side. Sachin?
Matur Jandana Janer, repeat that. Matul Maturja Dhana Panarderde Dhaturas Sammate Shete Vidam Mutra Yorgate Sa Janturjana Stu Sambhavai. Excuse me. Deriving its nutrition from the food and drink taken by the mother, the fetus grows and remains in that abominable residence of stools and urine, which is the breeding place for all kinds of worms. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Nice to see how, it has been compared and described. Anilji?
Yeah. Kramivir Shata Sarvanga Saukumaryat Pratikshanam Mursha Mapnotyu Proklesha Sastratya Kshuditayarmuhu. Bitten again and again all over the body by the hungry worms in the abdomen itself, the child suffers terrible agony because of his tenderness. He thus becomes unconscious moment after moment because of the terrible condition. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yeah. So how a child comes into existence is what is being described by Kapil Muni here. Yeah. Sachin?
Tikshnoshna Lavana Ruksam Ladirvir Ladirvirud Labdehe Matru Bhuktaya Ru Pasprushtaha Sarvangon Sarvangonthi the Vedana. Owing to the mother's eating bitter, pungent foodstuffs or food which is too salty or too sour, the body of the child incessantly suffers pains which are almost intolerable. Hare Krishna.
Pulbe samvritasta asmin netrachya bahiravrita aste kritva shiraha kuksho bhugna prashta sirodhara. Placed within the amnion and covered outside by the intestine, the child remains lying on one side of the abdomen, his head turned towards his belly, and his back and neck arched like a bow. Sachin?
Kalpah Swanga Cheshtayam Shakunta Eva Panjare Tatra Labdha Smutir Dairvat Karma Janma Shatodbhavam Smaran Dirgha Manuchavasam Sharma Kim Nama Vindate. The child thus remains just like a bird in a cage without freedom of movement. At that time, if the child is fortunate, he can remember all the troubles of his past 100 births, and he grieves wretchedly. What is the possibility of peace of mind in that condition? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So if the child is fortunate, he can remember all the troubles of his past 100 births. Do you know who knew about like his past 3 or 4 births? Like it is said that Dhritarashtra knew about his past 3 births. And so you're asking Lord Sri Krishna that, hey, I remember last 3 births and I haven't done anything wrong. Yeah. So why is he being punished like that? So, and then Lord Krishna explains that you don't remember it, but I know. And then before 3 years, what you did, he explains that to Maharaj Dhritarashtra. So let's do one more shlok. Anilji?
जी आरभ्य सप्तमान्मा सालब्ध बोधपि वेपितः नैकत्रास्ते सूतिवातैर्विष्ठा भूरिव सोदरः. Thus endowed with the development of consciousness from the 7th month after his conception, the child is tossed downward by the airs that press the embryo during the weeks preceding delivery. Like the worm born of the same filthy abdominal cavity, he cannot remain in one place. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, so like, at that point, Kapil Muni is describing like how everything works. Yeah, there was no ultrasound or something that time. Right? But it's mentioned like from the 7th month is when the development of consciousness starts. Yeah, and the child is tossed downwards by the air. Yeah, just before the delivery. So I think we'll pause here. Yeah. And we'll continue tomorrow from 31.11. And then since, we've been looking for the Hanuman Jayanti, so this week we'll play the Hanuman Jayanti, Hanuman Bhajans. Yeah. So we'll play this for 2 to 3 minutes. 1 second.
ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് നിങ്ങളുടെ സഹായം അല്ലാതെ ഒന്നുമില്ല. സർജറി പറഞ്ഞ ഈ അവസ്ഥയിൽ ഞങ്ങളെ കൊണ്ട്
अतुलित बलधामं हेमशैलामदेहं तनुजवन कृशानुं ज्ञानीनाग्रगणयं सकलगुणनिधानं वानराणामधीशं रघुपतिप्रियभक्तं वातजातं नमामि. अतुलित बलधामं हेमशैलामदेहं तनुजवन कृशानुं ज्ञानीनाग्रगणयं सकलगुणनिधानं वानराणामधीशं रघुपतिप्रियभक्तं वातजातं नमामि. अतुलित बलधामं हेमशैलामदेहं तनुजवन कृशानुं ज्ञानीनाग्रगणयं सकलगुणनिधानं वानराणामधीशं रघुपतिप्रियभक्तं वातजातं नमामि. अतुलित बलधामं हेमशैलामदेहं तनुजवन कृशानुं ज्ञानीनाग्रगणयं सकलगुणनिधानं वानराणामधीशं रघुपतिप्रियभक्तं वातजातं नमामि.
So nice prayers for Hanumanji, yeah? And cool. So we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jai Ho.